Well, back in 2002, an animated movie came out called Ice Age. And in this movie, you had really two stories going on at once. The main story was a story of Manny, a woolly mammoth, Diego, a tiger, and Sid, a sloth, as well as a little baby boy. But what was interesting about this, and what made it different than a lot of other films, was that they had a sideline plot about a squirrel named Scrap. Now, through all the movies, and there was several of them, Scrap was always on the lookout for an acorn, for basically one of these. And every time he found one, he tried to shove it into the ground, and really, I don't know why, it doesn't really explain it, but my best guess was he was trying to save them for later. But the problem was, when he did that, is major things happened. And in the movie, the first movie, a small action of shoving this into the ground had a huge effect. And moments after he shoved it into the ground for the first time, an avalanche actually started to go, and it kind of affected the people around him. And in a later movie, I think it's the fourth of the series, he shoves an acorn into a mountaintop, and it causes the continents of the world to drift and to separate. And Scrap pretty much does this in every single movie and short that he's in. And every time, his small little action of taking one of these little acorns and shoving it into the ground has major effect on really everyone around him. And this really leads us to the big idea of today, which is that little things make big things happen. Little things in life make the big things happen. And see, this idea is not just found in a movie, Ice Age, a film that has no bearing on reality, but it's also found in the story of a man whose life is full of these small decisions. And I want to look at a man named Joseph, who God used a bunch of small choices in his life to make a huge impact, not only on his own life, but really on millions of people's lives. And so Joseph, he was the firstborn son of Jacob's second wife and Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. And this made him Jacob's favorite son. In fact, Joseph was loved more than all his other brothers, which of course led to some major problems between him and his other 11 brothers, specifically the 10 brothers that were older than him. And then one day, God gave Joseph two dreams, and God told Joseph what those dreams meant. The first dream, Joseph found himself surrounded by 11 bushels of grain, and these 11 bushels of grain then bowed down to him. And the dream here meant that Joseph's 11 brothers would one day bow down to Joseph. And then in Joseph's second dream, Joseph found himself surrounded not only by 11 stars in this case, but also the sun and the moon. And then all the stars, the moon, and the sun all bowed down to him. And this meant that not only would his brothers bow down, but one day also his mother and father would bow down to him. And of course, Joseph did what he thought was best, and he told his family about these dreams. And of course, this just made the situation worse. Before, his brothers were probably mad at him. I mean, his dad was definitely showing him favoritism. But now, they actually hated and despised Joseph. And so Joseph's brothers did pretty much what every other brother would want to do, right? They had a plot to kill him. Well, one day Jacob sent Joseph to check in on his brothers, and they saw him coming from afar, and while they were working, they decided, you know what, now is the time. They were furious. They wanted to kill him. But Reuben, the oldest brother, decided, hey, let's not kill Joseph. Instead, let's just throw him in a pit, right? That's such a great big brother kind of move, right? Actually, the Bible tells us that he was actually planning to come back and save him later. But then the brothers, after they threw Joseph into the pit, they saw this caravan of people passing. They're on the way to Egypt, and they said, you know what? Let's not kill Joseph. Let's make a little money on him. Let's sell him as a slave and then tell our father he's been killed by a wild animal. And so here is really where the story of Joseph starts. We find Joseph sold as a slave, and to a man named Potiphar. And all throughout Joseph's actions, all throughout his life, in his early part of his story, all his actions and attitude, he actually climbs the ranks because of this, and he becomes in charge of this household. And so then, all of a sudden, he has these false allegations thrown at him, some bad treatment, and people making some bad decisions, and now he is actually gone from being the second and really in charge of this whole household of Potiphar. Now he's then been sent to jail. But even in jail, Joseph's actions and his attitudes got him to basically being in charge of the jail. In jail, Joseph then interprets some dreams of some people that were with him. Again, we see this dream thing going on in the story, and because of these interpretations, he actually has the opportunity later to interpret Pharaoh's dream and is eventually placed second in charge of all of Egypt, under Pharaoh. And so then the story kind of comes full circle when Joseph actually saves his family from starvation because of the position that he's in. And so when we look at this story, we probably look at Joseph in awe and of the authority and the power that he has. We know that this is given to him through God, but it wasn't that God just one day said, hey, you know what? I want to make Joseph this powerful person. I want to make Joseph the second person in all of Egypt. In fact, we see this happening because of the small decisions all throughout his life. But in the Gospel of Luke, we see Jesus making a simple point, a similar point that we see through his life. We see that being faithful with the little things, that God will give you bigger things. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, it says, if you are faithful in the little things, you will be faithful in the large ones. But if you are dishonest in the little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, then who will trust you in the true riches of heaven? If you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? And basically, Jesus is saying, hey, those that are faithful with the small things are worthy of being given the big things. And that's what happens in the story of Joseph. He was faithful in the small decisions in his life. The prophet Zechariah also gives us a warning in Zechariah 4, verse 10. It says, do not despise the small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand. Zechariah is basically giving the simple truth. All the big things, all the big people, they all start with something small. And this leads us to the first point I want to give you guys, and that is don't despise the little things. Well, what does it mean to despise the little things? It means to look down at them, to not care about the small things. We're called to not despise them because they all have tremendous power over the world around us. Just like Scrap, he pushed this little bitty acorn into the ground and caused an avalanche or the continental drift of the planet. If we don't look out the little things in our lives, we won't realize the tremendous effect, and we could be that effect in a bad way to the world around us. So what are these little things? Well, there are basically three areas or three types of little things in our lives which we should look out for and make sure that we're doing a good job in. And the first is your thoughts. Your thoughts actually have a tremendous amount of power in your life. They affect everything that we do. Jesus spent a lot of time talking about your thoughts and your heart, which is pretty much just the same thing. In Matthew chapter 5, we see Jesus preaching the Sermon on the Mount. And during this lesson, this great sermon that he teaches, Jesus takes the law that was given to the Jews and he takes it really to the next level. He contrasts what they've been told to do and shows them that it's much deeper than that. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 and 22, we see Jesus saying, you have heard that your ancestors were told you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say to you, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. That's a pretty bold statement there. Basically, he's saying if you've hated someone, if you've been mad at someone, then you've committed murder. And Jesus follows this pattern throughout pretty much the rest of this Sermon on the Mount. And this point that he's trying to make is, while you may think that your thoughts aren't that important, they're not that big of a deal, the reality is they have tremendous effect on the other people and on our life. And so we need to watch out for those. Another thing we got to watch out for is, the second thing is our words. We should watch out for what we say. James spends the greater portion of a chapter talking about the tongue, showing that the tongue has great power. In James chapter 3, he compares the bit of a horse's mouth to our words. And in James chapter 3, verse 4, he compares it to the rudder of a ship. The point is this: your tongue has power. And what does he mean by your tongue? He means your words. And because of their importance, something so small as a word can certainly make a huge difference on the world around us. And the third aspect that we got to watch out for is our habits. Our habits are really just the action of our thoughts and even our words. They're a reflection of who we are. And when you look at Scrap throughout the entire movie of Ice Age, his habit was pretty simple. Get an acorn, bury it in the ground. That was his action. That was his habit. And this made major things. When you look at Joseph, a man who really did well in these three areas, his actions were faithful to God. They were a reflection of what he believed. his actions were always honoring God and giving him authority in his life. And so we're looking at this, we'll see all these things, and a lot of times we can get a little overwhelmed with the big idea, the big whole element of how we should change our lives. And I want to challenge you with our second point is start with one thing. Here's the main point. Start with one thing and pick one important thing. Start with one thing. Why? Because when we're trying to do the big things, we can get overwhelmed, and God doesn't really even work that way. Instead, think about the big things that you can do for God. But instead of just thinking about just the big things, think about the small things that lead up to the big things. And be faithful in the small things. Look at your life and think, how can I be faithful to God in the small things in my life? How can my thoughts be faithful to God? How can my words be faithful to God? What can I be nicer with my words? What can I uplift people with my words? What can my habits be faithful to God? What kind of habits do I need to break? What kind of habits do I need to make in order to really be faithful to God in the small things in my life? And then pick one thing, just one thing. Pick one thing to change today and to work on and to get better at. See, January is a month in which people get the biggest, or the gyms get the biggest attendance. They get the most people joining gyms in the month of January. People have all these new goals, they have all these new things, all these new resolutions to do. Maybe they want to lose 25 pounds, maybe they want to run 2, 3, 5 miles. They have all these big things and they choose to set these goals. The problem is when people set goals that are just too big, too much to do, and then they end up giving up on them. And so the idea here is, hey, instead of setting this huge goal that's really either unattainable, not possible, or we kind of get bored before we finish it, pick one thing and start to glorify God with that today. So here's some kind of homework for you. What's your one thing? My one thing is blank, and this is a kind of a question I can't give you an answer to. That's the thing that you have to listen to God. What's your one thing? What is the thing that God has placed on your heart to do? What is a small thing that God wants you to be faithful to Him in doing? What are you supposed to do starting today? So that's your one thing. Now that you know what your one thing is, find a verse that will inspire you, challenge you, remind you, equip you to keep doing that one thing. And then fill it in. My one verse. So don't think about the big thing. Don't think about all the things that God, these big actions, but think about, hey, what is the one thing that I can do? What is the one kind of small thing that I can do in my life that will have a great, a massive impact on myself and on the world around?